The Kazekage Rescue Mission is the arc that reintroduces the Naruto story after the time skip, kicking off Naruto Shippuden, and it gets a bad rap. Now, there are fair and unfair reasons as to why many people dislike this arc. If you are an anime-only watcher, then you have plenty of reasons to do so. However, if you read the manga, the arc's actually much better. And today I'm gonna be defending this arc because it is a very good one in the manga, and I'm gonna be explaining why the anime counterpart doesn't do it justice. And obviously I'm also going to talk about a couple of things that I don't really like about this arc, because nothing's perfect, really. Now, the main problem people have with this arc is its pacing. Let's face it, it's pretty atrocious in the anime. The manga is very well paced. If you've never read the manga and you read the Kazekage Rescue arc for the first time, you're going to realize that there are a lot of scenes that are not in the manga, and most of those scenes don't do much to add to the story. They just essentially pad the runtime. Some are really cool, such as Kakashi weaving the fastest hand signs we've ever seen in the series during the second bell test and using the fireball and the water dragon jutsus. And yeah, the second bell test was much shorter in the manga. It was longer in the anime, there were a lot more stuff, but the conclusion was exactly the same, and everything they put in the anime didn't do much for the story, just looked kinda cool. However, there are other things that are included to pad the runtime, but they don't even look cool, they just tank the pacing of the story, which is why people complain a lot about this arc. For example, did you know that the Kankuro vs Sasori fight is pretty much an anime-only fight? In the manga, we just see the result of the fight. Kankuro arrives there to fight against Sasori, they cut away, and then when we come back to Kankuro and Sasuke, Kankuro's already on the ground, completely defeated. We see him capturing that piece of cloth from Sasori's clothes that he gives to Kakashi afterwards so Kakashi can track him, but we don't see the real fight because there's no point. It was just a stomp. We saw the result, that was everything we needed to know about it. But the two most egregious, slow additions to the story in this arc are, first, the chase between Kakashi, Naruto, and Deidara when they're running after Deidara in those weird trunks on that canyon that extends for almost an eternity. They cut away to that particular part of the story a lot in the anime, and Kakashi and Naruto are doing the exact same thing over and over. They're pursuing Deidara non-stop for hours. That pursuit is much shorter and to the point in the manga. It doesn't feel dragged out, well, because it isn't. Kishimoto doesn't have the habits of spending page time on pointless story, and it is one of the most boring parts of that arc. Yes, Kakashi eventually using Kamuy Deidara is really cool and a very important moment for the character in the series, but the entire time they're pursuing Deidara before that is boring and pointless. Also, Team Guy versus their doppelgangers is absurdly long and poorly animated in the anime. It's one of the worst looking fights in the history of the Naruto series, and it's absolutely devoid of stakes. Everybody knows Team Guy is not in danger of losing to doppelgangers, so it's boring, pointless, and poorly animated. It's like the hellish combo. Team Guy versus their doppelgangers in the manga was 2-3 pages long max. Kishimoto certainly did not linger on it very long because he knew this wasn't the important part of the arc, and it would be boring for us to see Team Guy fighting against copies of themselves that everybody knew they wouldn't lose to, and that they were in no danger of even getting hurt against. And there are many more anime additions that make the pacing slower. For example, the way Sakura heals Kankuro from Sasori's poison takes much longer in the anime. It does feel more climatic in the anime because it feels like Sakura had to go through more efforts to pull the poison out of his body. But when you add so many different small things into the arc, you're gonna end up making it slower than the anime was supposed to be when adapting the manga. And some additions, they can be good, but overwhelming the arc with additions here and there, especially bad ones like I mentioned before, is not a good idea. Personally, the best addition in my opinion for this arc was when Chio is dead and they're going back to the Sand Village, but then when they're about to re-enter the Sand Village, Gaara says no, she goes first, and they drag her corpse into the Sand Village. It's a very sad scene and emotional, but it's a worthy scene because Chiyo sacrificed herself to save Gaara. And this scene doesn't happen in the manga, which is a shame because it's a great scene, and yes, a couple of additions in the anime are extremely good. The problem is that for every scene the anime adds that makes the story better, they add 10 that either tank the pacing or are just outright terrible. Or both. And this is a pretty big problem, especially in the beginning of Naruto Shippuden. The Kazekage rescue mission and the Tenchi Bridge arc are littered with those scenes. And unfortunately for those who have only watched the anime, they're gonna come out of this arc thinking it's pretty bad. And this is not a good thing because this is the arc that kicks off Naruto Shippuden. After the time skip, you're really excited to see what the characters are gonna do, and the first arc is really slow paced. But if we ignore that and just focus on the manga, how does this arc do when you objectively look at its story without all the anime filler that they add in? Well, it's actually pretty damn good. The arc starts with Naruto naturally returning to the Leaf Village. After all, this is the story coming back from its time skip. Oh yeah, they didn't do that stupid flash forward in the manga, by the way, when they see Sasuke and the Tenchi Bridge arc before Naruto Shippuden even starts, because that's dumb. We do get the very standard stuff, reintroducing the characters after a time skip, showing their new designs, showing you how they changed, especially Naruto and Sakura in this particular situation here, but also other characters like Temari, Shikamaru, and other Konoha 12 members. Then, we see a bell test, again, for the second time. Sure, it's a lot of fan service because it's one of the most iconic parts of Naruto, but it makes sense to reintroduce the characters for the first time in a more controlled environment, especially under the circumstance they're in. They're not gonna throw Naruto in a very dangerous mission without knowing exactly how powerful he is, so the bell test was supposed to test his abilities. It's a really good writing tool to contrast how Naruto has grown since the first bell test and how he's the same. Obviously, Kakashi remarks he's much more skilled, but he also remarks Naruto started before Kakashi said start, so yeah, his core nature hasn't changed, he's just more experienced now. We also see Sakura can punch really hard, and she was training on Tsunade for that. And in the end of the day, Naruto and Sakura get the win over Kakashi because of Naruto's plan to spoil Jiraiya's book. Naruto knew that Kakashi would have to cover his ears and shut his eyes, otherwise he would read Naruto's lips, and he didn't want to get spoiled because that's one of the most important things for Kakashi's life. And this was important. Naruto had to win this fight to say, yeah, he's really grew. However, he couldn't just overpower Kakashi completely because then Kakashi would be weaker than Naruto, and this is not something Kishimoto wanted to do here. Kakashi still had to be more powerful than Naruto for narrative reasons. After that, we get the first reintroduction of the Akatsuki with a fresh new duo, Deidara and Sasori. A very interesting duo of the Akatsuki, and we were hyped to see what the Akatsuki was all about because when Naruto Part 1 ended, we saw the conference with all those weird looking silhouettes. And yeah, those two guys are extremely weird. The artists, they have very different visions of what art really is, and their mission is to capture somebody very important. Gaara, the new Kazekage. The Gaara vs Deidara fight is actually very underrated. I don't see many people talking about it, but it's a pretty good fight. It's the first fight after the time skip that has any real stakes in it, because let's be real, the bell test fight, yes, they're important to measure Naruto's new abilities, but it's not as though Naruto and Sakura's lives are in danger. And on top of the fight being very cool between Deidara and Gaara, they're two flying guys. We've never seen two people flying and fighting at the same time in the Naruto series. In terms of scale, this is the greatest fight we've seen so far in the story. Nothing has come close to the amount of power these two characters are throwing against each other. Gaara's sand attacks are massive. He's using the entire desert to try and combat Deidara, while Deidara is tossing Gaara bombs after bombs, and they're exploding very, very hard. I mean, Deidara pretty much nukes the Sand Village, and Gaara defends it. And probably the best scene of that fight, seeing Gaara, the guy who was completely ostracized and hated by his village, being accepted by them and protecting them with his life, is cathartic. And this fight also foreshadows that the Akatsuki is extremely powerful, and that the power levels that we're going to be seeing more often are going to be way higher here than in Naruto Part 1, because the characters are no longer Genin anymore. They are far, far more powerful, and they're gonna be fighting against the Akatsuki a lot. I mean, Naruto technically remains a Genin for the entire series, but that's beside the point. The point is that Gaara vs. Madara is showing what the new power levels are gonna be and that you should be used to it. It's a Kage fighting against an Akatsuki. The fight should have epic proportions, and people are gonna say, I hated Naruto Shippuden because it's no longer about taijutsu. They're not even ninjas anymore. They're too powerful. There's no strategy anymore. Okay, if you say that, then I'm pretty sure you haven't really seen or even read the Madara versus Gaara fight, because the way Madara beats Gaara is very clever. It's extremely ninja-like. He lets his arm get blown up to introduce explosives into Gaara's sand so that he can attack Gaara from within his sand shield. And the argument in Naruto was supposed to be about ninjas and stealth and always people that go in the shadows and taijutsu is bogus, because in the literal first page of the Naruto manga they talk about a gigantic fox that can cause earthquakes and flatten mountains just by waving its tails. It's just that in Naruto Part 1 we most often watched characters that weren't as powerful as characters we're gonna be watching now. Obviously Gaara gets captured and then Naruto is sent by Tsunade at the last second because he wasn't even supposed to go to this mission. It was just a coincidence, essentially, to go and recapture Gaara with Kakashi and Sakura. We get to see Sakura's new abilities when she heals Kankura from an unhealable poison that a 95-year-old Chio was unable to heal, one of the most experienced medical ninjas in the world. It says a lot when Sakura was able to do that and Chio wasn't. Well, she was trained under Tsunade, but still, it's pretty impressive because Sakura is becoming like Tsunade. And then they get Chio in the team and go after Gaara. It's around this point that Team Guy joins Team Kakashi in the mission, and this is a pretty intelligent move by Kishimoto from a writing perspective, because after Team Kakashi, Team Guy was certainly the most popular team with fans. People were excited to see Neji, Lee, Guy, not Tenten, but anyways, Tenten tagged along. And showing them in the very first arc after the time skip was a good move to keep people invested and say, oh, look at these characters, remember them, they're cool, we're gonna do some cool stuff with them. And just to keep things more hype, he sends Itachi to fight against Team Kakashi and Kisame to fight against Team Guy. Now, Kishimoto couldn't do outright fights between these teams because Kisame and Itachi especially were quote-unquote saved for later moments in the story, but showing them earlier, re-establishing them as threats was good to do in the first arc after the time skip. After all, Itachi is an extremely important character for Sasuke's backstory and for the universe as a whole, to be honest. And it's in this arc that we get the first real glimpses of Itachi's true intentions. When he gets defeated by Naruto's Odama Rasengan, he smiles, and that really confuses Kakashi, Naruto, and the rest of the team. But obviously, looking back, this is clear foreshadowing for Itachi being a good guy all along. The way Guy defeats Kisame is also very satisfactory because for the first time we see Guy using the gates at all, and he uses the 6th gate, something we'd never seen before. Lee only went to the 5th gate against Gaara back in Naruto Part 1, so seeing the 6th gate is another method of foreshadowing, saying that, yes, we're gonna be progressing through the gates here, and rest assured, you will eventually see the 8th gate. It's gonna take a while, but obviously it's gonna happen. And this fight against Kisame is where Kisame's rivalry with Guy actually starts, because sure, they kinda faced each other back in Naruto Part 1, but Guy just landed a kick on Kisame and they didn't do anything more than that, just kinda stared at each other. So it's not as though there was this big bad blood rivalry between the two. It's just funny because the rivalry is kind of boring because Guy doesn't remember who Kisame is, and Kisame is trying to remind him of who he was during the entire fight. And Guy, being Guy, he cannot recognize faces very well, and he's like, I don't know who you are, dude. It just makes for an interesting and compelling rivalry. And giving Kisame a rival in the Leaf Village is also an interesting idea because, yeah, the Akatsuki are extremely powerful, but they should have rivals just like everybody else kinda does. It helps the characters in the Akatsuki to feel more personal because now, well, they are really messing with the characters we love. And sure, these fights didn't go all the way because they were just 30% body doubles, but they weren't supposed to be the set piece battles of this arc. They were an appetizer, both for this arc and what was to come in its conclusion, and also for Itachi and Kisame later on in Naruto Shippuden. But it was a good idea to have them here from a writing standpoint. Team Guy and Team Kakashi finally converge on the location where the Akatsuki is extracting the One Tail from Gaara, and they succeed in doing so. They're too late. They cannot save Gaara, and he literally dies and gets his tail beast extracted by the Geromazu ritual. And let's just be real here, the Geromazu ritual looks really cool. Each Akatsuki stands on a finger of the Geromazu that corresponds to the ring. And yeah, unfortunately, Kishimoto doesn't really develop the Akatsuki rings all that much. They seemed way more important than they actually became in the series in this first arc, which is a shame. The concept of the rings being unique and extremely important is pretty much dropped. Yeah, you can infer the rings were used during the ritual. Only the person carrying the ring can perform the ritual to extract the tail beast, but this is never really explained. It's just speculation, but the concept in of itself looks cool. And sometimes that's everything you need really in a shonen series. In order for the Leaf Village to break into the hideout, they have to remove seal tags in 5 different locations at the same time, so Team Guy has to go and remove them, and that's where the doppelgangers arise. And as I mentioned before, this fight's terrible in the anime, but it's whatever in the manga. It's so fast you don't even see it passing through, so you're not really complaining that this fight's going on for too long and it's boring. But that's not the important part of this section of the story. The important part is what happens with Team Kakashi. Because Sakura and Chiyo are gonna fight against Sasori, and Kakashi and Naruto are gonna pursue Deidara, who's carrying Gaara's corpse away, trying to lure Naruto so that he can capture him and the Nine Tails. And now it's the part we talk about, the absolute best part of this arc. The Sakura fight. Yes, people hate Sakura because she's useless and she does nothing in the story, but that's not true because the Sakura and Chiyo versus Sasori fight is amazing. Now yes, some people may say this fight is too long just like this arc, but this fight is not too long. You just get that impression in the anime because it's intercut with so much filler stuff. The Kakashi and Naruto pursuing Deidara forever, and the doppelganger fights that you feel like this battle is too long, but when you read the manga, this fight feels great. Yes, it is in the longer end of Naruto fights, it lasts for a decent amount of chapters, but the fight always maintains its narrative thrust. Kishimoto does a perfect job of keeping the audience interested and tense because every time Chiyo and Sakura seem to have the upper hand, Sasori comes up with a counter, and a different form, and a different puppet, then a different set of puppets, then a different army of puppets. It's crazy. While Chiyo and Sakura are doing the same thing, adapting and strategizing. One time they're on top, another time they're really being pressed against the wall by Sasori. And this is a very interesting fight for so many reasons. The first one being just the backstory between Chiyo and Sasori. It's a very personal and emotional one. Sasori loses his parents very young, and he feels lonely for the rest of his life. He tries to bring them back by creating the parent puppets, and that becomes an obsession that makes him kill people and eventually create the living puppets that are extremely powerful, eventually also killing the third Kazekage, the most powerful Kazekage of all time, and using him as a puppet. The Iron Sand looked very cool in the fight, and it's a great concept. And there's something sad to watch a grandma and a grandson fighting to the death. And Sasori is just a very tragic character. The problem with the audience getting attached to Sasori's backstory, and even Chiyo, is that they're killed in the very same arc that they are introduced in the story. Now, this is not an inherent problem, but usually these characters feel less impactful because they don't last as long in the story. Now, of course, people love a lot of characters that die in the same arc they're introduced, but usually they're not gonna become the most popular characters in the series, even though they may be great. But the death of both characters was actually very impactful and well done in this arc, so I'm not really complaining about that. I'm just stating why people may not care as much about them, even though Sasori has something of a cult following in the fandom. But the overall fight's amazing, and the length Sasori went to extend his life and to feed his obsession, turning his entire body into a puppet, leaving only a small living core, while Chiyo tried to do pretty much the same thing, but only went so far as to replace an arm to a puppet arm, shows that the characters were similar to each other. After all, they were grandma and grandson, but they weren't willing to go to the same lengths. Also, the 100 puppets versus 10 puppets scene is amazing. There's something epic about Sasori saying, I know these 10 puppets of yours were able to take a castle, but mine, 100, were able to take a country. Yeah, obviously, these statements are only supposed to hype up the fight we're about to watch, but there's something epic in the lore when characters say things like that. And it does work. You feel the hype before those puppets clash against each other. But we also have to talk about something else that kind of turned people away from this fight, and people will say, yeah, this fight kind of sucks, and that's gonna be Sakura. Sakura just being in the fight kind of downgrades it for a lot of people. And honestly, I don't know why, because this is absolute peak Sakura in the entire series. The Kazekage Rescue arc is the best Sakura arc, and it's not even close. She lost her bratty attitude. Of course, she's still teasing Naruto here and there, but it's much more friendly than it used to be. And she's just useful. She saved Kankuro's life. If it wasn't for her, she and Chie would have died against Sasori because they wouldn't have the antidote. And she was fighting amazing against Sasori. She was one-shotting puppets with a punch left and right. Sakura destroyed the Hiruko puppet. Sakura destroyed the third Kazekage puppet. Sakura destroyed several of the puppets in the 100 puppet army. And yes, Chiyo was helping Sakura a lot in that fight, but it was pretty impressive. And the themes behind Chiyo controlling Sakura with her threads was really cool too. Sakura was willing to cooperate with somebody else from another village, somebody that used to be an enemy and direct rival of her master, Tsunade, and they just came together to fight against the Akatsuki. Also, the way Sakura takes a sword in the gut for Chiyo shows her development as a character. When she used to freeze in very difficult situations before, now she's acting and willingly sacrificing herself for other people. Even though Chiyo is much older than her, she still chose to do the noble thing, and that's why Chiyo began to change on top of fighting against her grandson. Chiyo had pretty much lost faith in her village and everything. She was just waiting to die fishing out of a pond before they called in after Gaara was captured, but in the end of this arc, she regained her spirits because Naruto and Sakura showed that the new generation still tries to fight against the evil in this world and do something better. And she realized she could have done better with Sasori too. It was somewhat her fault for him going bad the way he did, and fighting against her grandson is a way to redeem herself. Which takes us to Sasori's demise, which is one of the saddest in the Akatsuki, I would say. He just accepts death when he realizes Chiyo used his parents' puppets to pierce his heart, or living core, however you make it. He just willingly takes the attack and chooses not to defend himself, to die in their parents' embrace, taking it back to when he first created those puppets and used them to hug him as a child after he lost his parents. It's just very sad, first because obviously it was his parents, man, and because Chiyo was the one who did it, his grandma. And while this fight is happening, Naruto and Kakashi are pursuing Deidara, which is much faster in the manga. Kakashi shows his Kamui for the first time, an ability that's going to be extremely important in Naruto Shippuden. And the first Kamui use is pretty cool. Yeah, it's pretty much the only time Kakashi uses Kamui to snipe somebody else, but he still does it against Deidara, and Deidara was flying a very straight line, so probably it was much easier for him to aim his Kamui anyways. We see Naruto going two tails for the first time, and we see Kakashi dealing with it. The way Kakashi deals with it is a little bit lackluster, just gets a paper from Jiraiya and puts it on Naruto's forehead, kind of like, yeah, just plots no jutsu jutsu here, put the paper, it's alright, we just have to show Naruto getting a little angry. There aren't a lot of repercussions for Naruto going 2 tails in this arc, which is a little bit annoying, to be honest. This is much better done in the Tenchi Bridge arc, an arc that I don't like, but the way Kishimoto does the 4 tails in the arc is really good. Deidara fakes his own death by blowing himself up, and Naruto manages to retrieve Gaara. And I mean, seeing Gaara dead before was what prompted him to go 2 tails, but there's nothing really he can do. Gaara's dead and Naruto has failed, except Chiyo has a jutsu that can help. And yeah, you can argue Chiyo's jutsu here that's able to resurrect people is kind of pulled out of her ear, but it does sacrifice her life, so there's a steep cost for you to use that jutsu. And I imagine you wouldn't be able to resurrect somebody that's been dead for 80 years and it's just a skeleton now. You need a pretty fresh corpse, because you have to transfer your life essence into the body so that the body can come back to life. And that's what Chiyo does. She gives her life to bring back the 5th Kazekage, the hope for a better future for the Sand Village, and the conviction that Chiyo died with, that yes, there were problems in the past, but these new guys can solve them. Maybe there's a chance, maybe there's hope. The Jinchuriki used to be hated, they used to hate everybody else, but Naruto and Gaara were completely different. They showed compassion, they showed caring, they showed love. So maybe the world has a chance after all, and that's why Chiyo sacrificed herself. And the scene where everybody from the Sand Village comes to the field and surround Gaara after Chiyo brings him back is very emotional, because as I said before, Gaara was hated by everybody. He was a demon, and now people respect him, and he respects them back. This arc is very satisfactory. It's not the best arc in the series, but it's far from being terrible, especially when you consider the manga version. However, there are problems with it. Now, most of these problems are not actual deal breakers from a writing perspective. They're more wasted potential than anything else. The first problem was that, sure, Team Guy was reintroduced in the arc, but they weren't very well explored. Sure, they fought against Kisame, and that fight was pretty good. Guy got development, Kisame got development, and the rivalry began to flourish there. However, Neji, Lee, and Tenten pretty much did nothing in this entire arc. I mean, they fought a bit against Kisame, but then Kisame captured the 3 of them in a water prison, so Guy had to bail them out with a 6th gate, which was a really cool moment as I said before, but still, his team didn't get a lot to do in that fight. And then when they arrived in the hideout, sure, they do a couple of mechanic things. Neji finds out what the tags are with his Byakugan, because that's what the Byakugan's meant to do, and then they remove the tags, and then they fight against their doppelgangers. But as I said before, this fight sucks a lot in the anime, and it's very forgettable in the manga. The lesson they learn is that they should be stronger than they were the day before, and sure, I mean, pretty cool lesson, I suppose, but nothing extremely impactful, especially because the enemies they were fighting against were extremely lackluster, just fighting against themselves. Not very good opponent for you to fight against, as I mentioned before. And that's all they do. The only character in Team Guy that's decently used here is Guy himself. Unfortunately, Rock Lee and Neji, who were extremely popular and important characters in part 1, are glorified background characters in this arc. And unfortunately, this begins a trend here of characters that used to have much more relevance lose said relevance in Naruto Shippuden, especially characters from the Konoha 12, which is unfortunate. I mean, think about this. Gaara and Rock Lee had a big history together, obviously. I mean, Gaara fought Rock Lee in the Chunin exams in one of the most remarkable fights of the entire series, and Gaara crippled Lee, essentially. He thought he would never be a ninja again, and then Gaara saves Rock Lee in the fight against Kimimaro. Wouldn't it be cool if Lee had a little more to do with the Kazekage rescue mission, seeing their history together, and that Lee kind of owed him a favor, but not really, but actually, yeah. These two characters, they were always paired up in Naruto Part 1. It would be more interesting if they were also paired up in Naruto Shippuden, because obviously the pairing of them worked very well, because they had big contrasting personalities, qualities, and problems. And you kind of saw a friendship developing after the Kimimaro fight. Yes, Rock Lee told Gaara, I mean, you screw me up real bad, but I mean, thank you for saving me against Kiyomaru. I guess we're even, but it's not as though Lee loved Gaara or anything, but it's an interesting concept for you to develop this friendship. Unfortunately, Lee does pretty much nothing here. Neji doesn't do much either. Technically, there wasn't an opportunity like the Lee-Gaara situation for Neji in this arc, but you could have done more with Neji. He had a deep bond with Naruto after all, or even with Neji and Guy and his team. Nobody cares about Tenten, like, who cares? I mean, Tenten not getting screen time is no news. And the other issue with this arc is Naruto himself, unfortunately. Now, this is also an issue of how Kishimoto decided to treat Naruto in the beginning of Naruto Shippuden, because Naruto doesn't learn a whole lot of stuff in the time skip, if we're being honest. The best thing he comes up with is a slightly larger Rasengan that, granted, he uses to defeat Itachi's body double in this arc, but it doesn't feel terribly impressive, does it? Compared to what Sakura and Sasuke learned over the time skip, Naruto feels stagnated. Yes, he got stronger, but not impressively so. And that's kind of an issue here because the story is called Naruto. Naruto is obviously the main character, and he feels much more like a side character in this arc. Now, there are some arcs where it's acceptable for you to kind of sideline your main character to focus on somebody else. There are several arcs in Naruto Shippuden that do that and focus more on Sasuke than they focus on Naruto, but this is the first arc after the time skip. You should focus more on Naruto himself because he's the main character and you're just coming back for a time skip. And this arc doesn't really try to completely sideline Naruto or anything. They're still trying to make him an important part of this mission, and yet he feels pretty useless most of the time. Actually, he kind of feels like a liability in the end when he's going two tails, and yes, this is supposed to be part of the story. Naruto is a ticking time bomb. The Nine Tails can go crazy anytime, and you're supposed to feel scared about it, and that's why Kishimoto did the two tails thing in this arc. But there's an important storytelling rule, and bear in mind that storytelling rules are not hard set rules, or more like guidelines, but the rule says that your main character should solve your climax. Think about that. Take the Land of Waves arc. Naruto solved that climax when he taught no Jutsu Zabuza. Naruto solved the climax of the Chunin exams when he defeated Gaara using Gamabunta. He somewhat solved the climax in the Search for Tsunade arc when he landed a Rasengan on Kabuto and saved Tsunade, talk no Jutsuing her into becoming the 5th Hokage and defeating Orochimaru. And he definitely solved the climax in the Sasuke retrieval arc. Yes, he lost the fight, but that was the solution of the climax. The protagonist was involved. It just so happened that Naruto lost the fight. In the Kazekage rescue mission, Naruto is tagging along with Kakashi to go after Gaara, but Kakashi is the one who uses Kamui, and yeah, Naruto fights against Deidara, but that Deidara had no arms, barely any chakra because he fought against Gaara and sealed an entire tail beast for 3 days, and he had Kakashi and Team Guy helping him out in that fight, so it doesn't really feel like Naruto did anything too impactful here. Sakura did way more than Naruto in this arc, and I mean by a long shot. And this is kinda ballsy from Kishimoto. He chose Sakura to be the one who got the climax fight for the arc, which is obviously Sakura and Chio versus Sasori. That is the set piece battle of the arc. The longest one, the most elaborate one, the most emotional one in every single sense. And obviously Sakura is an extremely important character. After all, she is in Team 7, but she's not Naruto. I don't dislike the fight between Sakura and Sasori. As I said before, this was the best moment of the character, but Naruto should have gotten more, and because he only got a slightly larger Rasengan over the time skip as an improvement, and yes, he got a little more intelligent and stuff, still, he feels lackluster, and this is a problem of choice. Kishimoto didn't give Naruto a lot of tools for him to step up in this arc. The most cathartic moment for Naruto in this arc is when he defeats the Itachi body double, and sure, yeah, he shows a slightly larger Rasengan, but if you think about it, Itachi there could have been defeated by Sakura landing a punch on him, which was equally as destructive as Naruto's slightly larger Rasengan. Kakashi did all the work in that fight. He was the one who fought against Itachi, he was the one who held Itachi down for Naruto to land the finishing blow, so he could have done the exact same thing, but instead Sakura could have punched him instead. But if you swap Naruto and Sakura's position to fight against Sasori, for example, Chio and Naruto would have just lost. It certainly feels like Naruto is not that impactful in this arc, which is a problem. And one of the issues people have when they watch this arc now, maybe you watch this arc and you've never really thought about Naruto not being as important for this particular mission here, but your subconscious did. This is one of the reasons why this arc doesn't rank as high as many others. And these problems that I mentioned, Naruto not being as important, and the wasted potential of Team Guy are not problems just in the anime, they are present in the manga as well. But even still, these problems don't break the arc completely, they just make it not as good as it could have been. But this arc is still pretty good. If you read the manga again, or for the first time you have never read the manga, you're actually gonna see that, oh, this is very good. There's no 10-minute sequences of doppelgangers fighting each other. It's great. Watch this other video for more cool Naruto content. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already, and like the video to help me out with the YouTube algorithm. It really does help, so please. And thank you so much for watching.